Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through the industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Crystal Harrell. She is the best-selling author, motivational speaker, academic success coach, and PhD candidate at Yale University. Welcome to the show, Crystal.
Thank you so much, AJ, for having me.
You are welcome to the show. You are welcome to India in this online form, Crystal. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we'll be talking about. We'll talk about education, we'll talk about setting life goals, and we'll also talk about spirituality. So, my first question to you, Crystal, is to understand, you are you have grown up in a difficult background, not too much of money, and between a big family, nine siblings, losing a parent, and in public housing or apartment, and then coming out to this position with a great book, best-selling author, and you have a great life ahead of you. A lot of times, people who are in poverty, they look at small things, trying to survive. You looked at education as your ticket out of poverty. Where did you get this motivation from? Why did you not just live in the survival mode, but actually try to move out of poverty through education? I want to understand that motivation so that others can also, take the same
Yes.
motivation for themselves.
Yes, this is such a great question, and I've never had it asked before, but I really love it. Um, but I guess the biggest motivation to answer the question, fully, is my dad. He was the driving um, factor when it came to my education. Before he passed away, he would always tell me that education was something that no one can take away from me. And I loved that he was always reading. I loved that he was just I always thought my dad was the smartest person I knew. He was very wise. He never had a chance to go to school. So I'm a first generation low income student. But he always talked about education. And so when he was alive, I was always asking him to teach me how to read, teach me how to write. And he would do it because I think he really saw very early on that I had kind of this love for education, and it served even after his passing. So honestly, he was the biggest driver.
Right, right. And how did it then work out for you? How did one is that having motivation, one
Mhm.
is putting things into effect on the ground. How did you
Right.
start doing that?
Mhm.
That only obviously you didn't think of a PhD at Yale at that point
Mhm.
in time. Obviously,
Yeah.
you take the small steps. So I want to understand from you, uh, how did you take these steps? Like nowadays people talk step by step, almost like that. That okay, this is how you want to move forward, move toward out of poverty, and make a life for yourself.
Yeah, I mean it's a long answer, so I try to shorten it a little bit. But to be honest, the earliest I can remember like having this idea of like, okay, I'm going to use education to help me out of this situation that I no longer want to be in was after the passing of my dad when I was 11 years old. So after he passed, he had leukemia, so he lost his battle with leukemia. But after that happened, I went into this deep state of just isolation. I felt very scared. I was going into my preteen, so you can imagine that is a very important developmental phase for adolescents and emerging teens. But I, was just going through like kind of this dark night of the soul type of thing. And so um, after he passed away, you can imagine my mother having 10 children. It was very difficult for her. And so I watched her kind of struggle. And I just knew that I felt within me that there was something different. And so I kind of was just like, okay, I started to get more attention in school from being smart. I never considered myself smart before my dad passed away, but I started to notice how being, kind of a high achiever in school was giving me the attention. So honestly, it came from a place of just feeling so lonely that I wanted something. I wanted someone to notice me for something. And so it initially started out of this fear-based reality, like trying to create something out of fear. But after, going through, getting help and just seeing how the unfolding of education was, how far it was taking me, I started to realize that I could actually create a better life using education out of love. So I kind of switched my focus. And so along the way, I've had teachers and mentors kind of tell me, okay, have you ever considered graduate school? And so that's why, coming out of public housing, no, I didn't know what graduate school was when I first started school. I just knew that when I graduated from high school, I wanted to get an education. I didn't know how I was going to make it happen. I didn't know. My mother couldn't afford to take out loans for me. And so I knew that either I applied for free money, which is, scholarships and grants, or there was no way for me to go to school. So as a high school senior, I basically spent all my time after school applying for thousands, like it felt like thousands, but it was probably close to like 50. And so I was applying for scholarships every day. Every time I was rejected from one scholarship foundation, I would apply for two more. And I kept like a notebook, just like a regular notebook that you would buy from the discount store. And I wrote down every scholarship that I was applying to, and eventually ended up getting over $670,000 to go to school. And that was the beginning of, having someone come into my life that, said, oh, have you thought about graduate school, when I was an undergrad? And he's still my mentor today. And then once I got into graduate school, someone said, hey, have you thought about applying to Yale? And I was like, no way, like there's no way they would accept me. And then, now being here, so it's interesting how life works, but I believe that success is compounding. And so once you take that first step in faith and just, really believe that, where you're going is special and that it's determined for you, I really believe that's nothing we can achieve. Because if I've learned anything throughout these 11 years as a student getting a formal education, I would say that the human will is so powerful once you have a vision. So yeah, I would say like that's how things kind of stacked, was just having that vision for something better and allowing things and people to come into my life to help me get there.
Right. Along this whole process, how did you pick up the right advice when you are moving in life? You have got
Mhm.
several people who are giving advice to you. So, how did you know which advice to take, which advice to not take?
Yes.
Secondly, in terms of scholarships, you kept on applying. So, does this mean that a lot of people who are having difficulty in their finances regarding to education, they can look for right kind of scholarships and keep on applying? Help us
Yes.
understand this part of this, because finally you got, as you said, around $700,000 of scholarship, and then also the prestigious Gates Millennium Scholarship. So
Yes.
I want to understand both this part so that it can show some way to a lot of people who are at this stage in life.
Yeah, surprisingly, those two answers kind of go hand in hand, because a lot of it was just me following my intuition. Like, I really believe that we all have access to a part of us that just inherently just knows the way. It knows what's best for us. And so I really tried to listen to, what do I want in life? And I was very blessed in the sense where I didn't have parents who tried to tell me who to be. I kind of just watched them, and I watched how they lived their life, and I watched how my older siblings lived, and I decided how I was going to live my life based on what I was seeing and based on what I felt true to be true for myself. And so when I was applying for scholarships as a high school senior, there was basically my intuition that was just like, you have to look for free money. And I was like, okay, yeah, well, where do I begin? And so I started asking people. I went to my educators and I asked for, anything they would know about scholarships. The beautiful thing about scholarships is that if you're a minority, if you're low income, like the situation I was in, if you had experienced something traumatic in life that was kind of hindering you from pursuing higher education, you are more than likely to get more scholarships, because they look for people who have that drive but don't necessarily have the financial backing to basically pursue higher education. So if you have a natural just kind of like a natural ability to be in those environments, but you don't have the money, I would say apply and just see what happens. Because if you don't apply for scholarships, then you're not going to get any. So if you apply for scholarships and you get rejected, at least you tried. And that was my whole mentality when I was going through the process, was the answer is no if I don't apply, so I might as well apply. And the rejections were hard, um, but I needed a way to go to school.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely, Crystal. Now let me understand this. how did you move forward? How did you do goal settings for you? Did you
Yes.
think at what stage did you think about Yale? You
Yes.
are a first lieutenant in the U.S. Army. How did that come by? And then how did this bestseller book, Crystal Clear, how did that come by? Means I want to understand your mindset. How did you come down to goal settings? That which direction to take. This is what you want to achieve, or it
Yeah.
just happened all at the same time. I want to understand that thought process.
Yeah, it definitely didn't happen all at the same time. Those events kind of unfolded naturally. I would say it felt very natural for me, but I guess goal setting goes all the way back to, like I said, before I was even in high school. I always felt like there was something else, and I knew that if I didn't try, then I would definitely not see it. And so all the goals that I've ever set, I wrote them down because I really believe in really putting your like joining that mind and hand coordination and just really writing down what do you want in life, and it gives you a chance to really see what's inside on paper. And so I wrote every goal I've ever had down. Even when I was in high school, I wrote down that I wanted to go to school, like I wanted to go to college, and that ended up happening. And then when I was in college, I wrote that I really want to get into a nice graduate school program once I learned what graduate school was from a mentor. And then that happened. And then once I was in my master's program, I had a guidance counselor who basically said, have you considered applying to, Yale? And at the time, I definitely didn't have the confidence or the scores that I needed to get into, a school like that. But I knew that the research they were doing at Yale was very aligned with the research that I wanted to do for honestly the rest of my life. I already decided that I wanted to do this type of research. And so I connected with a faculty member at Yale, and then, spoke with him, and then one thing led to another. And, now I'm in my fourth year, graduating this May. So it's exciting to see how things happen. But I would say you have to have a vision for your life. And once you have that vision, just write it down and then take the steps toward that. And it may evolve into something greater, which is the case for a lot of people, including me. But I think the first step is the most important thing.
Right, right. So,
Mhm.
what is your vision now after you get your PhD, and then what do you want to do with that? Because that's a long journey then from a public housing situation to a Yale University PhD.
Yeah, the thing is, that's such a good question too, because I'm at a stage where I'm really trying to tune into that intuition, that higher part of me that's been guiding me this whole way, and I really want to, feel what is best for me after I graduate. And everything keeps pointing to, what do you love to do? And I love speaking, I love research, I love writing, I love communication, I love bringing these big ideas into tangible form. That's exciting to me. But how that looks after I graduate, I don't know yet. It may manifest as, having some type of corporate career. It may manifest as being a professor somewhere, or being a postdoc. I don't know really. But the thing is, I want to make sure that I'm aligned with what brings me the most joy and what helps the most people. And so, yeah, I'm open to how that looks after I graduate. And I honestly think that this is the first time in my life where I've been this open to life. And it feels good. It feels strange because I've always had a 5 to 10 year plan. So it's very strange. It's not natural for me to do this, but it's different. And I think it shows that I'm willing to grow and I'm willing to try different things in life. And if not, then I'll just, go into the military full time and see what comes from there. But I'm very open to how my dreams kind of unfold after I graduate.
Right, right. Crystal, you talk about, for the youth, especially, you talk about harnessing the power of personal growth and
Yes.
self awareness to achieve their goals. Help us understand this in a better manner so that they understand personal growth, they understand self awareness, to understand, but
Yeah.
to understand it in the right context is very important.
Yes, yes. I think that, so just for context, I like to think of self awareness as a flashlight. And so when we shine a flashlight on something, we're illuminating it, right? We're bringing our attention to what is being illuminated. And I think self awareness is like that. So when we shine self awareness, instead of shining it out, we're shining it inward. We're thinking, we're basically becoming aware of everything that we've been thinking, the things in life, how we react to life, how we respond to certain people in our environment. We're just becoming aware of it without judgment. No this is not, oh, this is wrong, this is right. It's just, are you aware of how you behave in this life? Are you consciously aware of how you are showing up, how you're responding to people, how people are responding to you? And I think that that's the most important thing. No matter what goal you have in life, you have to know who you are. You have to know what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and don't label them good or bad. Just know what they are. That way you can navigate through life and you can navigate toward your goal in a way that basically is best for you, for who you are, because there's no one like you in this world. And there will never be anyone like you in this world. So I think that is important to first know who we are. And then as you go towards your goals, then you start to figure out, okay, this is what I want. This is what feels right for me. So I honestly don't think whether your goal is to go and get an education or a formal education, or whether your goal is to start your own business. And you can do both even, but I think that it's most important to know who you are and what you want out of life.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, and that is where you wrote your book, Crystal Clear. There is much
Yes.
to learn from you, and I'm sure a lot people can learn more about from your book. It's a nice name, a part of your name, and it actually is very apt. So, help us understand what this book is all about. What subjects have you dealt in this book?
Yeah, so it's basically so the subtitle of that book is from public housing to Ivy League. So I basically just take that whole journey, that piece of my life, and I put it in a book, and I try to distill kind of like lessons that I've learned. And I basically tried to do like a self-help type of book using my own story because it's the only story I know at a deep level. And so I just used what I've learned and I put it in a book in a way that is going to serve other people. Because around the time where I was accepted into Yale, I was getting a lot of questions from students from all different parts of the world, to be honest. And they were asking me, like, how did you do this? How did you do this? And so my mom told me to put it in a book because I was trying to finish school. So it was hard for me to coach every student, but she told me to put it in a book. And she even gave me the name for it. She said, name it Crystal Clear. And so that's what I did during the pandemic, during that time when we were spending a lot of time inside. And so I decided to sell my TV to get a coach actually to help me write the book. And then it became a bestseller in 2 categories on Amazon. So it was very exciting, but it was one of the hardest things I've ever done.
Wonderful, wonderful. A right message, a crystal clear message for a lot of people not to
Yeah.
waste their time and to make something of their life. Now, let me ask you this: as a youth, someone who is very young, and a lot of people in this uh, young people in these times when there are so many challenges, either in terms of climate change, either in terms of artificial intelligence coming in, mental health issues coming in, many
Mm,
issues coming in, and a lot of toxicity, great resignation, so many things to think
yes.
about. Amidst all these things, how do you make sense of it all and find your path forward? What would you like to tell? How do you decide your things so that people can understand, they can take tips to look bit, amidst all
Yes.
this fogginess that can certain come on sometimes in our lives.
Absolutely. This is such a good question, AJ. I swear you have some of the best questions. Um, I would like to start by saying that my heart goes out for this generation. I have 2 younger siblings who, were born into, the generation that we're looking at now. And I feel like I'm pretty sure my generation also struggles with, a lot of things as well. But I feel like, especially this new generation, they were born into a life where they're like, we are still trying to figure out, like the adults, like the people who are already here are trying to figure it out. And so there's no telling how they feel. There's no telling the number of things that they're dealing with, like anxieties. And like you said, a lot of mental health. And my research right now at Yale focuses on the mental health of young adults in the US. And I feel like there's so much in the literature, and I don't even think that the mainstream media actually talks about what's going on when it comes to the mental health and psychological health trends right now that that the data is showing. And I feel really my heart goes out for them. But the way that I try to maintain my inner peace and my sense of well-being in this world is that I decide what I'm going to consume, and I decide what I'm going to put out in the world. And so one of the ways that I do that is by actually, I don't have social media apps on my phone. I delete the apps from my phone and I get on social media when I feel like it. I know that those apps are made to be addictive. Like that's literally how they're designed, is to grab your attention. So I don't, I try not to like, have any judgments towards people who are, all day scrolling, but I realize like what that does to your brain, um, what that does to your mental health. And I don't think it's good to be consuming other people's lives all day and all the drama in this world. I think it's important to have an awareness of what's going on, but you can also be aware of poison without consuming it in your body. You know it's poison and you know what it'll do to you, but you don't have to drink it. And I feel the same way for a lot of the media and the news that's happening right now. I know what's happening in the world, but I don't have to watch hours and hours of content of people doing that to each other to know that I have to make a stand, or I have to say something, or I'm going to, say like, I stand for this or I don't stand for this. So yeah, I think it's just a matter of being aware of what you're going to consume, what you're going to take in to your psyche, because it has an effect on your mental health. And the moment I got rid of social media out of my life full time was the moment where I would say that my greater sense of well-being started to return.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now let's come to the spirituality part of it.
Mhm.
So, is this where one can find refuge in, either for the young generation or the, because you put spirituality into both public health, integrating spirituality in public health, and also talk about public personal evolution through spiritual and academic pursuit.
Yes.
How do you want, especially the young generation, to look at spiritual pursuit or spirituality? How do you look at it? How have you looked at it and achieved the great results for yourself?
Yeah, I think spirituality has been the greatest, well, at least my spiritual growth has been the greatest aspect of this entire journey. Um, I like to think of it as spirituality something distinct from religiosity. A lot of people use them as the same thing, and they're not the same thing. Religion can be a way to access the spiritual aspects of life, but we're all spiritual. And I look at spirituality as the formless, connected part of who we really are, kind of like our higher selves, the part of us that is truly connected to everything in this environment, every person in this world. I look at spirituality that way as an aspect of connectedness. And so religiosity can be a tool to access that, but you don't necessarily need it. And even today, the data is showing that a lot of people are identifying as being spiritual but not religious. And so there's a lot coming up with that research, and it's very exciting because there hasn't been a lot on it yet. But it's interesting to see what's coming up. But I really believe that having a sense of knowing how connected I am to everything and everyone has helped me understand that, what I do to one person, I'm essentially doing to myself. The people who are hurting people, the people who haven't taken the time to develop who they really are, those are the people who are hurting the most. Because only someone who is hurting, only someone who is struggling internally is going to hurt someone else. And sometimes we do it intentionally or unintentionally. And I know I've done it before. And I can honestly say that I've probably caused the most pain to other people when I had no sense of spirituality, no sense of who I was, no sense of how I was connected to someone else. And so once I started this spiritual growth, and honestly, it started by reading books. One of the first books I read was Think and Grow Rich. And a lot of people don't think of it as a spiritual book, but it really does tap into the formless aspects of life. I started to read The Power of Your Subconscious Mind, and I wanted to learn how my mind worked. And I started to read other books like Deepak, I think it's You Are the Universe. And then there was other books coming in, Thich Nhat Hanh. I read a lot of his books, Pieces Every Step. And I can't even explain what those books have done for me. But that is how I kind of started to understand who I was and kind of like the place that I was taking up in this world. And honestly, I feel like we should be responsible for the type of energy we bring into the room. And in order to be responsible for it, you have to be aware of it. And so everything kind of comes back to the self-awareness. But spirituality is such a big part of it. And you do not have to be religious in order to understand spirituality.
Right. Right. So my last question is then how should people, in a nutshell, how should people look at their transformation? Should they look at it in terms of circumstances? Should they
Yeah.
look at it their inner understanding of things? Should they look at it at ambition? Should they look at it something spiritual achievement? How should they look at it so that they achieve transformation for whatever they seek for themselves?
Yeah, it's a good question, but I can honestly say that self transformation is very personal. So, everyone is different when it comes to how they transform, how they evolve. But I will say that some of the beginning stages can come from painful situations. I know, at least for me, I was at the lowest point in my life when I was 23, and I remember one day I woke up and I was so heartbroken during this time. You can imagine there was a lot of trauma from watching my dad die from cancer, and then I was in a situation where I wasn't really showing myself the most respect. I'll say it like that. And so one day I woke up and I remember it was Tuesday morning, and that's how profound this day was for me. And I remember I looked up at my curtains, which were sheer gray, and I remember looking at them when I woke up and thinking, I wish I didn't wake up. And I remember when I had that thought, I realized that I was aware of that thought. And I thought, well, if I can be aware of that thought, then that means that thought is not who I am, the real part of who I am, the silent observer. And I kind of just saw that split that happened internally. And then that's when I started to realize, okay, well, if that thought isn't me, if I'm not my depression, if I'm not my anxieties, and during this time I was having so many panic attacks, and I wouldn't wish them on anyone. They're one of the scariest experiences ever. But I was going through all of that, and I remember thinking, like, if this isn't who I am, then I want to know who I really am. I want to know who that little girl was before the trauma, the one that smiled, the one that had a love towards life, the one that was curious, the one that loved exploring. I wanted to get back to her. And so that journey of tapping into this part of myself I knew to be true, or I felt to be true, has been the greatest catalyst for all the well-being and everything that I think experienced in life. And I would say one of the greatest things is just having that sense of peace. All the accolades and achievements, they're a plus, and I'm very grateful for them. But a lot of that came out of being afraid of what would happen if I stayed where I was. It wasn't from, oh, I want to see what I can create with education. It was, I need education to get me out of this situation because I don't want to be here. And now, like I said, I'm on the same path, but my intentions are totally different. And so is my sense of well being. So I hope that makes sense, but I can definitely clarify if it doesn't.
Absolutely. It makes a whole lot of sense. And people will have to understand these things in their own context to make sense of
Yes,
who they are and what they want to do with their life.
absolutely.
And there is, as I can say, there is so much to learn from you. And this is just one episode. For more, they will have to come to you. So people who would like to learn more about you, more from you, more about your book, what is the best way for them to do so, Crystal?
Yeah, they can contact me on my website. It's www.crystaltharrell.com. And yeah, I have a lot of free resources on there. You could even I have a contact form, so you can shoot me an email. And I have my email on my phone, so I always respond to emails. I love the emails, to be honest. My partner thinks it's weird that I love emails so much, but I really do. I love that communication with someone, because there's someone else on the other side of it. But yeah, just shoot me an email, and yeah, I'll respond.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.